In 2024, Nintendo has a lot of remakes coming up soon. We have Luigi's Mansion 2 HD, we have Paper Mario The Thousand Year Door, which is absolutely nuts that game is being remade. We have Mario vs. Donkey Kong, lots of Mario remakes, and that's not even mentioning there's a brand new Mario game coming out next year in the form of Princess Peach Showtime, which is awesome. But these remakes are an interesting sign. Now, obviously, this points to the Switch kind of coming to a close on what may be like an 8 or 9 year console life cycle, which is awesome. I mean, forever ago, Nintendo said that this system was going to last 10 years. I think Furukawa or Kimishima or whoever was the president of Nintendo right after Iwata was talking about how he wanted this console to be a 10-year lifespan, which is nuts, and it might get there if they support the console after the Switch 2 launches, but it is pretty clear that we're heading into Switch 2 territory. Now, if you've been around for the 3DS era and the DS era and the Wii and Wii U, those consoles also naturally had kind of a petering out of game releases towards the end of their life cycles. Like with the DS, you start getting these Kirby, you'll get Kirby games a lot of times towards the end of these life cycles. Like we got Kirby Mass Attack towards the end of the DS era, and I remember Per Schneider from IGN saying, "Oh, it's the Kirby death sentence." Like whenever those Kirby games come out, it's the end of a console's innovation era. And Kirby Mass Attack, very fun game, but still we got that. At the end of the 3DS era, we had the same thing. We had a funny Kirby, Kirby Battle Royale at the end of that console's life cycle, and a couple remakes in that case as well. Funnily enough, Luigi's Mansion got remade for the 3DS in 2018 when that console was dying well over, that was almost 2 years into the life cycle of the Switch by that point. The 3DS was still getting these remakes. So how do we feel about remakes coming out so frequently towards the end of the Switch life cycle? Personally, all for it. I think it's awesome. When you specifically look at Thousand Year Door, that game released in the early 2000s, 2002, and it's so expensive on eBay now, hilariously expensive. Most people don't have a GameCube. That console sold 15 million units. Versus the Switch is at 130 million units. So the install base of the Switch is nearly 10 times that of the GameCube, allowing 10 times as many people the opportunity to play Paper Mario The Thousand Year Door, which is so welcome. I don't need to remind anyone the importance of this game and Nintendo's willingness to add new characters to the Mario universe. I mean, that was such a crazy area when Paper Mario The Thousand Year Door introduces Rockhawk and Vivian, the Shadow Siren, and she has these Shadow Siren sisters who are witches, and obviously the villain is this, giant purple, evil queen lady. I mean, so much weirdness added to the Mario world. It was awesome. It's so critically important to see Nintendo acknowledge this game and bring it back after 3 releases of Paper Mario games that, I personally found things to enjoy in, but a lot of people really didn't like the, complete gutting of the original Paper Mario characters. I also was not pleased to see them take out so many of the new characters, but I thought those games brought some interesting stuff to the table. I guess it might be a minority opinion to think that some of the paper mechanics were cool, but I liked a lot of it. The origami stuff especially was really just interesting to see. I liked the idea of the flat characters fighting the crumpled up origami characters. Somewhat beside the point. The point is that bringing back Paper Mario The Thousand Year Door to the Switch, to the largest install base of any Nintendo console, main TV console, obviously the DS still sold 150 million units, but there was no Paper Mario on that console. To bring the Thousand Year Door to the Switch, huge move. So many people have this console. So many people love Mario games. More people are buying Mario games than ever before. Mario Odyssey's at 27 million units sold. I mean, that's That's like over double Galaxy, which sold like 13. So it's not. I mean, more people are buying Mario games than ever before. The highest selling Paper Mario is somewhere in the around 5 million, 4 or 5 million. And if with 130 million Switches out there, it's very reasonable to imagine that this remake of Paper Mario: The Thousand Year Door is going to sell a few million units and beat out its original sales on the GameCube. I mean, that's awesome. Imagine the number of people who are going to get to experience all these original Mario characters, who are going to get to meet Goombella and Koops and fight Hooktail, and they're going to do the detective sequence on the train in Chapter 6 for the first time and think to themselves, oh my gosh, like this experience eclipses some of the more sterile, watered down, new Super Mario Bros.-esque games that we've gotten over the past 15 years or so, maybe even pushing 20 years. There's going to be so many more people who are aware of this opinion and understand the whole like Arlo universe that started in 2016 when Color Splash released. So many more people who are going to understand why Mario needs this level of innovation again. And it's just incredible to see Nintendo acknowledge this and bring back the game to the Switch. It's awesome. I think that remake is going to do wonders for the Mario franchise, and it'll be a great seller for Nintendo. So what's the big picture of this? The big picture is that a lot of previous Nintendo consoles didn't get much of note towards the end of their life cycle. Like, technically the Wii got Xenoblade and Skyward Sword, and the Wii U had Breath of the Wild in the end of their releases, but Skyward Sword was completely overshadowed by other more inventive games of 2011, like Skyrim, and I think Dark Souls came out the following year. There was just so much that was innovating in a way that Nintendo wasn't innovating with Skyward Sword, that release got really overshadowed at the end of that console's life cycle. And then with the Wii U, I mean, Breath of the Wild was a Switch game. At the end of the day, Aonuma and the directors at Nintendo said that the gamepad was detracting from the experience of Breath of the Wild on the Wii U. That game absolutely is a Switch game. It sold over 30 million units on Switch. So we see the end of these consoles being snubbed by the release of the next console and the games that release on the next console. Same thing for the DS. It's like, who's out here playing Kirby Mass Attack at the end of the DS life cycle? Who's out here playing Kirby Battle Royale in 2018, in January of 2018? Who's playing Kirby Battle Royale? Nobody. It's like, I think that these remakes, being Paper Mario: The Thousand Year Door is a high profile remake. It's not releasing some random game onto, at the end of the life cycle that people kind of just, I don't think you can just scoff at this and say, oh, Nintendo's not trying. At the end of the Switch life cycle. I mean, this is a huge tentpole release as far as Nintendo lore goes, the meta of Nintendo lore, and the opinions of the higher ups at Nintendo as to what Mario games they should put out and when, and what Mario can be. I mean, that release specifically is massive. Now, moving on to something like Luigi's Mansion 2. If you look at how Nintendo remade Luigi's Mansion on the 3DS, it was a year and a half, almost 2 years after the Switch released, and the 3DS got Luigi's Mansion Remake. The 3DS got Luigi's Mansion Remake almost 2 years after the Switch released. We don't even have a new console announced yet. So this remake of Luigi's Mansion 2 is coming way sooner into the death of the Switch than that Luigi's Mansion came, respectively, for the 3DS. So way more people have the Switch already and are willing to buy games still. So I think it's a fair thing to say that, Luigi's Mansion has never been more popular than it is now, with over 12 million units sold for Luigi's Mansion 3. And a lot of people are going to see 2 and go, oh, interesting, I can sort of get more Luigi's Mansion and see how the franchise has evolved. All those people that played 3 might see 2 and go, oh, okay, I can play the previous one. That's awesome. And the franchise isn't so story heavy that I think people will somehow not buy it because they're, worried about, oh, well, I should have played the first one first, because I mean 12 million people bought 3. 12 million people didn't buy the first one. So it's not like there's a ton of people out there saying, oh, I got to play them in order, so they should have released the first one. I think it's totally fine that they're putting the second one on the Switch, especially because the 3DS version already looked great, and it might not look as good as 3 looks, but it still looks pretty good based on these trailers. So I think that there's just some, red warning signs being flashed that don't necessarily need to go up. Like specifically Jake from Game Explain talking in their 2024 predictions video about how he thinks that these remakes shouldn't be something that we praise Nintendo for. I mean, Nintendo doesn't often do this much support for a console towards the end of its life cycle and release, such quality games as these. I think that we need to support Nintendo in, maybe not need, but I think we should support Nintendo in doing these types of remakes towards the end of a console, because it's something. I mean, it's certainly more than nothing. Like, if the alternative is getting Kirby Battle Royale, which is just a silly collection of like Mario and Sonic at the Olympic Sports-esque minigames, I would much prefer this type of remake. I mean, remakes of quality Nintendo adventure-style games that are actually, like real games. I'm sorry to anybody that like loves Kirby Battle Royale, but I would much rather have a remake of Thousand Year Door and a remake of Luigi's Mansion 2, and personally, just to segue into this one, also a remake of Mario vs. Donkey Kong. I think that was a fantastic game that a lot of people overlook because of its legacy and the sequels that followed it. I mean, Mario vs. Donkey Kong is a franchise that started in Donkey Kong 94, the Game Boy game, which, that game was a clear evolution of the original Donkey Kong, literally starting you in the, with the first 3 levels being regular Donkey Kong arcade gameplay, and then all of a sudden it turns into this massive world map, and it's level based, and there's puzzles, and all of a sudden Mario is an acrobat and he can do these backflips and all these crazy jump moves that eventually made it into 3D Mario. That was started in this Mario vs. Donkey Kong franchise. So to get this sequel, Mario vs. Donkey Kong on Switch, is awesome. Mario's movement feels great in this game. I don't understand the Jake from Game Explain, I don't understand his belittling of these remakes. And this one specifically, it's such a fun puzzle game. It's great. It's fantastic. I don't understand the belittling of this game. Very fun movement, very interesting puzzle mechanics. It's cool to see Mario in a platforming environment that's a little more thoughtful than just the run and jump of the new Soup games. And heck, it's even different than Super Mario Wonder. I mean, Super Mario Wonder has certainly creativity in spades, but it's still not a full-on puzzle game, and it shouldn't be. It's just that this one is a puzzle game. It just is different. I think there's a market for this. Nintendo made so many sequels to this game that were like Lemmings, that were like touch-based, guide the toy Marios around. That became sort of a staple of the DS, the 3DS, the Wii U. There were way too many of those games, but this is not that. This is an actual Mario platformer with Donkey Kong as the main villain. I mean, you literally get to fight Donkey Kong. We haven't had that in many Mario games. Literally in Donkey Kong, in like Donkey Kong 94, and then this specific game. And the other ones, it's like the little toy Marios. It's you barely get to actually do anything yourself. You're like telling these little lemming toy Marios where to go. They're fun games, but personally, I think this one was a great one to bring back, and it's very timely. It makes sense with the Mario movie. Having the Mario movie release, Mario fights Donkey Kong in that movie. So what better game to bring back than the one game named Mario vs. Donkey Kong? And it saves resources in this way for Nintendo, where they already have the levels laid out. All they have to do is remake the graphics. And the theory to all of this is less work for Nintendo, more games for us, capitalize on the Mario movie, and then the air quotes true talent at Nintendo, the real veterans of Nintendo, are hopefully just chugging away at whatever this next 3D open world Mario is, and lots of new games for the Switch 2 or the Super Switch or whatever comes here. Personally, I think that all three of those releases are defensible, great releases for Nintendo in an era where this console is slowly starting to sell less and less. The Switch sales are slowly tapering off here towards the 7th, 8th year of this console, and we're getting some releases that make a lot of sense to me. Now, looking forward, I do think that this is, a pretty clear sign that Nintendo is going to announce something new soon. Whatever that may be, it's going to be hard to predict. A lot of people like Arlo think that this next console is going to show that Nintendo learned from the Wii U and that horrible marketing mistake of not making it obvious enough that the Wii U was a sequel to the Wii. Instead, people obviously thought that it was some strange accessory, and it just did not sell well at all. I mean, the worst selling mainline Nintendo console ever. It's crazy. Personally, I do think that the next console is going to be some kind of iPhone 3G, like a very obvious, oh, we understand now that this is our iPhone. This is our big product that's going to guide our future until this model no longer makes sense, because Nintendo has just had so much success with merging their handheld and console markets, partially because it allows them to support one console with the full force of their development teams. I mean, all these games that are coming to Switch now, all these remakes that Jake from Game Explain is kind of poo-pooing the idea of even getting these remakes. I mean, it's more support for a console that has a ton of people buying into it, when these remakes might have gone to a different console originally. I mean, the Wii U was dying, and Nintendo was supporting the 3DS towards the end of that life cycle. So one console fails, Nintendo puts their development towards a different console that, was even older than the Wii U, but now they don't have to do that. They can just put all these secondary development teams on lower budget games towards the end of the life cycle, and most of the people that own a Switch won't even really know that these are lower budget games. They'll just go, oh, this is great, a new 3D Mario puzzle platformer game. That's awesome. There's so much to praise here. It's a more graceful transition from this Switch to the next console. And honestly, especially if these games are backwards compatible, I think that some of these games could be purchased by Switch 2 owners. I mean, if the next console has that little nub at the top of the game carts, like how the 3DS had, such that you can still put the Switch cards into the new console, but the little nub prevents you from putting, the Switch 2 cartridges into the original Switch. I think that a lot of these games could be not necessarily system sellers, but really strong performers, even into the life cycle of the Switch 2. Paper Mario: The Thousand Year Door, in my opinion, the gameplay holds up in 2023, in 2024. I think the gameplay is fantastic. It's a very dynamic and fun action-based RPG game that I'm certainly hoping audiences will appreciate as much now as they did back then. So let's say Nintendo announces this new console June of 2024. They announce Switch 2, backwards compatibility, all your old games work, maybe by some incredible stroke of luck. Breath of the Wild, Mario Odyssey, Luigi's Mansion 3. Some of these games get a resolution bump on the Switch 2, and Nintendo somehow clearly shows that they understand that backwards compatibility is an important feature for Switch 2. It's very possible that Paper Mario: The Thousand Year Door HD is going to sell well even into this beginning life cycle of Switch 2. And bring Paper Mario back to a place where Nintendo goes, oh, this is something we want to go back to. This is something we've made the assets for Paper Mario: The Thousand Year Door. Now we have this style. Maybe they make a sequel in that style now for Switch 2. It makes so much sense to me. I think it's a great move. I think these remakes make a ton of sense. And that's not even talking about how Princess Peach Showtime looks fantastic. Brand new Peach game. brand new Peach game at the end of the life cycle of the Switch. 130 million people bought into Switch that are going to see Princess Peach Showtime, that just watched the Mario movie and go, oh, this, Peach is doing stuff now. This is great. I think all the people that are going to buy the Switch 2, hopefully they'll get to play Princess Peach Showtime with backwards compatibility on their Switch 2. And, there's just so many excellent Mario games coming out. I think it's a great move. I think it makes so much sense after the Mario movie, and I'm hopeful that a lot of people will feel the same way and really buy into, especially Paper Mario: The Thousand Year Door, so Nintendo can see, people value this type of remake because it's modernizing and beautifying an old game that's such a core Mario audience love, and they'll be encouraged to make a new one in a similar style.